There is a number 2 on there, see it? From Leviticus 19:16, do not stand idly by another's blood. That means, among other things, in Jewish tradition, you can't stand idly by while somebody else's money is at risk, and you are in a position to help that person avoid loss. Is that interesting? That's very interesting. You wouldn't know that right away from reading the Torah, by the way, which leads me to make another very important point, and again, hopefully I'm annoying a lot of people. And that is that the Torah, in and of itself, the written Torah, is not a sufficient law book. It is not a law book. As a matter of fact, it's called Torah, and Torah doesn't mean law. But it's not a law book. Truth be told, you couldn't even run a second-rate magistrate's court on the basis of the 5 books of the Torah alone. If that's all you had going for you, you could not run a magistrate's court in the city of Cleveland at all. There's not enough in there to go anywhere with it. What is, it's not a law book. It's not a code. It's not a legal code. The Torah is a formulation of basic principle, of inviolate, divinely ordained, if you want. I'll talk about that a little bit later, although that's not an insurmountable matter. It is a collection, it is a formulation of basic, we might say, principles of conduct, for which, in order that sense be made out of the Torah, we must have recourse to all the accumulated wisdom of the Jewish people ever since the Torah was given, in order to know what the Torah is talking about. I assure you, and you can check me out on this, ask a knowledgeable Gentile, anyone in your life that you like, who knows Bible. I promise you that you will not get the response if you say, what? Read for me Leviticus 19:16, Al ta'amod al dam re'echa, do not stand idly by for your brother's blood. You will not see in the non-Jewish world, even the Jewish world, any response which indicates that in fact it is talking, among other things, about money, about a responsibility of a knowledgeable individual to help another individual who is in a position of potentially sustaining a loss out of ignorance, not to stand idly by without giving timely advice to that individual so that the individual may avoid loss of his money. You won't find that anywhere else, but that is Torah, and it's not ethical. It's Torah. And I'm going to move a little bit more with this idea about something that is not ethical but Torah. Some of you, in the course of your academic lives, undoubtedly have studied Greek philosophy, and certainly have come across Aristotle in a number of instances. But just to sum up something of an important point here, in one line, taking all that Aristotle had to say, and it was a lot, about ethics, a very complex field, by the way, to which we're not doing justice to, because I'm not teaching ethics tonight. One line in the mouth of Sir Anthony Kenny, the emeritus fellow at St. John's College, Oxford, a worldwide great authority on Aristotle and on ethics. He says, in summing up Aristotle in one line, dangerous, virtuous action, then, is always the result of successful practical reasoning. I'm going to run this by you again. It's very important to hear this line. Virtuous action, that means ethical, then, is always the result of successful practical reasoning. Got it? That's Aristotelian ethics in a nutshell, and it's non-Jewish. And we have a lot in common with Aristotle. We love Aristotle. One of our greatest teachers ever was an Aristotelian, pretty much an Aristotelian, cheated a little bit, the great Maimonides. Why do I say that this is not where the Jewish tradition is? And by the way, when I say this is not where the Jewish tradition is, I'm not interested in denomination, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstruction, blah, 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 blah. I'm talking generic Jewish, okay? And most of the time, only want to talk that way. Why? What's the problem with this? All is always the result of successful practical reasoning. The notion in the sphere of ethics, a large notion in the sphere of ethics, is that you can come to the ethical component of a matter through the proper application of philosophical inquiry, philosophers always say that, and reasoning. My understanding of how our Torah works and how our Jewish that more often than not, one of the great secrets of Torah, it's not a secret, is that the Torah is counterintuitive. The Torah does not go with logical reasoning in many, many instances. In innumerable instances where you might think that if you use a good mind and you put your intelligence to work, you'll come up with the proper bottom line. Torah does not work that way. Sometimes it does. Most of the time, I have to be careful with my language, a great deal of the time, it is what we call counterintuitive. That the Torah goes against what you might have thought. And in fact, it can be argued, and I argue this way, that one of the great things about Torah for the Jewish people is, in fact, that it's counterintuitive. You don't get it naturally. That's why we have the Torah. You understand that if the great things that the Torah is talking about could all be reached by reason, and by the proper application of human intelligence and inquiry, we would have been there a long time ago. Jews aren't the smartest people in the world. We're not the only people in the world. We have Torah. But there have been Gentiles around a long time before Jews, writing law and writing treatises and trying to discover what the good life is. So I say to you that in Jewish tradition, and this is across the board, there is nothing ethical that is not grounded in law. If you want to use the word ethical in a Jewish context, if you insist on using the term, it can only go together with the concept of law. That is, in fact, one of the great and most important things that the Jewish tradition is doing, namely, to come to wrestle with, ultimately to try to decide what proper behavior is, not by how you got there, and not even necessarily by what does experience teach, and not necessarily by virtue of what do really well-grounded, intelligent Gentiles say, etc., 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 but what does the law demand? So, in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, the world at large, by and large, chooses to talk in this realm that we're investigating in terms of what is ethical. And the Jewish tradition chooses to talk in terms of what is the meaning of Torah. Our word for ethical is Torah. Okay. Having said that, a couple of other things that come into play here. One here is, if you're interested in this whole matter of law and human behavior and ethics and conduct and morality, one often hears the term natural law. It happens to be very important in the Catholic Church, by the way, although Catholic doctrine has undergone a lot of changes in this regard in the last century. And basically put, natural law means that there are things that are embedded in the nature of the human being that speak to proper, meritorious, acceptable behavior. They are implanted in us. They are natural. There is a presumption, by the way, it's not uncomplicated, but we got another, what do we have, an hour. The idea is that all things being equal, if a person were left to his own devices with respect to attempting to understand what a behavior should be in a given circumstance, or how a person should live a life, I'm not talking about the religious life, then an appeal to what is inherent in the human being would work. A lot of things get in the way, we don't think clearly. I'm talking for the natural law people, and for some long tradition in the Catholic Church. Things get in the way, your mind gets scrambled, etc., blah, blah, blah. But deep down, God the Creator has created within us a sense of what is right and what is proper. So an example would be in, let's say, the Catholic Church, and in many instances in the world, that a prohibition against murder is kind of natural law. We know that murder is wrong, so the assertion goes, not because we have to be taught that murder is wrong, but it is inherent in the very sense of being a human being that we know that it's wrong. That would be an example, okay? And everything that I'm saying tonight with respect to them, whoever them is subject to controversy, to say the least, but I am purposely and hopefully honestly simplifying, if you will, so that we can make the essential points and get our hands around them.